The first time Celia kissed me, it happened at a city bus terminal with her little boy standing a few feet away, and an old woman in a red coat staring at us like she had just seen something filthy. For years I had imagined what it would feel like to touch that woman, and when it finally happened, it lasted maybe 3 seconds. It still changed my life so completely that sometimes I think everything before that moment was just the road leading to it, and everything after it was the cost. My name is Ryan, and I was 16 when I fell in love with the married woman next door. Back then, I lived with my parents outside Dayton, Ohio, on one of those tight little streets where everybody knew everybody else's business. If somebody got a new couch, the whole block noticed. If a couple fought with the kitchen window open, half the neighborhood got a free broadcast. People borrowed sugar, tools, lawn chairs, and information. Next door lived Celia with her husband and their 2 boys. At first, she was just the pretty neighbor. Then, one afternoon, she became something else. It happened at her younger son's birthday party. My mom took a gift over, and since the whole street was loosely invited, I ended up there too. I even brought my teenage girlfriend at the time, Emily, because that was what made sense. We were standing off to the side near the patio, paper plates in our hands, when Celia walked over carrying slices of cake. She smiled and said, "Look what I brought for the cutest couple at the party." She meant both of us, I know that. But when she said it, her eyes landed on me first. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I imagined the extra second. Maybe I have spent too many years replaying that moment and feeding it more meaning than it ever had. All I can tell you is that something shifted in me right there. Heat rushed into my face. My chest tightened. Emily laughed and thanked her. I probably muttered something dumb. But from that day on, I couldn't look at Celia the same way. Before that, she had been attractive. After that, she became the center of a private obsession. I knew how ridiculous it was. She was married. She had 2 kids. She was around 30, maybe a little older. I was 16, awkward, half-grown, and still trying to look older than I was. A woman like that was not supposed to become the most important person in my head, but feelings do not care what is sensible. They just move in and start taking over rooms. So I kept living my normal life on the outside. School, friends, my useless little teenage relationship, weekends, noise. But whenever Celia came over to talk to my mother, I went tense the second I heard her voice. If our eyes met, I forgot how to act natural. I never told anybody, not my friends, not Emily, not even myself in plain language. I just carried it. Then I turned 18 and got selected for military service. Leaving the neighborhood should have helped, and in some ways it did. A hard routine can flatten all kinds of feelings. I was away more, exhausted more, forced into a different rhythm. But every time I came home to visit my parents, a part of me checked that street before I even got out of the car. Sometimes I saw her, sometimes I didn't. The days I saw her stayed with me. Nothing happened. That matters. There was no secret flirtation buried in my teenage memory. No affair, no hidden messages, no late-night calls. As far as I knew, Celia had no idea what she meant to me. If anything, that made it worse. I was suffering over something that existed on only one side. One afternoon during one of those visits, I came back to my parents' house and found Celia in our living room with my mother. They were drinking coffee and talking like they always did, comfortable and easy. I froze for half a second when I saw her there. We said hello. My mother told me there was coffee in the kitchen if I wanted some, so I poured a mug and came back, acting like I wasn't listening. At some point, Celia turned to me and asked if I liked military life. I told her I did, mostly, that it was hard but good. She nodded, looked at me with more attention than usual, and asked if I planned to make a career out of it. I said I didn't know yet. Then she glanced at my mother and said, "Ryan filled out, didn't he? He got strong." My mother smiled and said, "He's turning into a man." Then Celia looked at me again, slow, measured, from my shoulders to my face and back, and she said, "Yeah, he really is." Maybe she meant nothing by it. Maybe she was just being warm and neighborly. But I was 18, half-starved from wanting her, and that look landed in me like a spark in dry grass. My hands actually shook around the coffee mug. When she left, she kissed my cheek goodbye for the first time. I caught the scent of her perfume or shampoo, or maybe just the warmth of her skin. I felt it the rest of the day. That night I sat outside and watched the lights in her house go on and off like an idiot. At one point she drove somewhere with the kids and later came back. She waved when she saw me. I waved back and acted like that tiny exchange didn't matter. It mattered way too much. Not long after that, I got released from service at the end of my required time. By then I knew I didn't want the military to be my whole life. I wanted freedom, privacy, some version of adulthood that belonged to me. My cousin Derek was looking for a place too, so we rented a small apartment together. That move had nothing to do with Celia. I need to be honest about that. I wanted my own life. We both had jobs. We split the rent. The apartment was cramped and cheap, but it was ours. Separate rooms, ugly furniture, a refrigerator that made strange noises at night, and the feeling that we were finally living like men instead of boys. By then, I was 20. I told myself the Celia thing had passed. What really happened was that it changed shape. It wasn't that raw teenage ache anymore, not every day. Time had put some distance between me and the boy who used to stare at the neighbor's porch. I worked. I went out. I dated here and there. But every time I went to my mother's house and saw Celia, something in me tightened. Not enough to ruin my life, enough to remind me it had never gone away. Then one Sunday I went to visit my parents after staying away too long, almost 3 months. And the first thing I noticed was that Celia's house looked wrong. No curtains in the windows, tall grass, no toys in the yard, no car in the driveway. Then I saw the real estate sign. I walked into my mother's house and asked, what happened next door? She said Celia and her husband had separated, that they had gone their own ways. The way she said it made it sound both ordinary and sad, like another family had quietly cracked open from the inside. I asked where Celia had gone. My mother didn't know. There had been no proper goodbye, no address left behind. One family there, then gone. I wish I could say my first feeling was pure concern for her. It should have been, but the truth is uglier. My first feeling was shock, then sadness, then hope. And I hated myself for that part. Not noble hope. Just the ugly realization that the biggest barrier in my mind had disappeared. I told myself it didn't matter. She still had children. She still lived in a world much more adult than mine. I still had no place in her life. But for the rest of that day, I couldn't think about much else. After that, I assumed I would never see her again. In some ways, that helped. Out of sight becomes its own medicine if you let it. Months passed. 7, I think. Maybe a little more. Enough time for the habit of thinking about her to thin out. Enough time for her to become someone I had once wanted and never gotten over properly. Then I saw her at the bus terminal. I had gone over to my mother's neighborhood for no special reason and was cutting through the terminal when I spotted her near one of the benches with her younger son beside her. He had gotten bigger. She looked a little more tired than she used to, a little worn down around the eyes, but she was still so beautiful it almost irritated me. For 1 second I thought about walking past. Then she saw me. There are moments when every nerve in your body tells you something small is about to become important. That was one of them. I walked over and said hello like I was calm. I was not calm. She smiled, surprised, genuinely happy to see me, and we started talking while she waited for her bus. Her son stayed close to her leg, restless, kicking lightly at the pavement. Every now and then, she rested a hand on his shoulder without even looking down. That little gesture got to me too. The ease of it, the softness. She told me she was staying with her mother for a while, still in the same area, just farther into the neighborhood. I asked how she was doing. She gave me that half smile people use when life is harder than they want to explain in public, and said they were managing. Then she asked about me. Said my mother had told her I moved out after military service. Called me brave for living on my own so young. I laughed it off, but I could not stop looking at her. At some point, because I was dying to know and because 7 months can change everything, I asked if she was seeing anybody. She made a face like the question itself exhausted her. No, God no, I don't want anybody right now. I want to think about myself a little and take care of my kids. Honestly, when you have children, you barely have time to breathe. Then she looked at me and asked if I was dating anyone. I said no. That tiny exchange changed the air. Or maybe it changed me. Maybe all that happened was that a door in my head unlatched and I heard it. Her bus was coming. I had maybe 30 seconds left to either let that moment end like every other moment between us had ended, or do something that would keep me awake all night. So I asked for her number. I tried to make it sound casual, said it would be nice to keep in touch, talk once in a while. She smiled, took my phone and typed it in herself. When the bus pulled in, she kissed my cheek goodbye. Her son climbed aboard first. She followed him, then turned once from the steps and looked back at me. She lifted her hand in a little wave. The bus pulled away and I stood there smiling like a fool. Then came the hard part, which was actually using the number. Having somebody's contact is not the same as knowing what to say to them. For days I opened our message thread and closed it again. I didn't want to sound childish, I didn't want to come off desperate. Mostly I didn't want reality to answer a question fantasy had protected for years. Still, I kept looking at her profile picture. One night Derek and I went out drinking with a few friends. I had more than I usually did, not falling down, just enough that restraint started feeling unnecessary. I got home late, sat on the edge of my bed staring at my phone, and did the one thing sober me might never have done. I sent her a voice message. I can still remember the humiliation of hearing myself say those words out loud and not stopping. I told her I had wanted to tell her something for a long time. I told her it probably sounded crazy. I told her I had been in love with her since I was basically a kid. I told her she had always been the most beautiful woman in my world. I told her seeing her at the terminal had stirred everything up again. It was too long, too honest, too exposed. The second I sent it, I regretted it. I reached to delete it, but she had already listened. A few minutes later, she sent a voice message back. "Ryan, are you serious?" she said, and I could hear the disbelief in her voice. My God, I never imagined that. I listened to that message over and over, not because it gave me an answer. It didn't. But because it told me I hadn't destroyed the world yet. I sent another message, shorter this time. I said I was serious. I said I knew the timing was bad and the whole thing sounded insane, but I needed her to know. Then, because alcohol and longing make stupid partners, I asked the question hiding under everything else. Was there any chance for us at all? Her answer took a while. When it came, it was careful. She called me crazy in a soft, amused way. Said no, of course not like that, not now. She was alone with the kids. Her life was complicated. But maybe we could talk. Maybe we could keep talking and see. That should have made me back off. It didn't. We started messaging. At first it was light. "Good morning. How was work? How are the boys? Are you still awake?" Small things. But small things done every day stop being small. They start building a hallway between two people, and one day you realize you have been walking down it for weeks. I learned pieces of her new life. She was staying with her mother because the separation had left her cornered financially for a while. Her older son was having trouble adjusting. Her younger one asked questions with no easy answers. She never dumped it all on me at once. It came in fragments, a rough day, a tired message close to midnight, a joke that clearly had a bruise under it. I told her about work, the apartment, Derek being impossible to live with when he was broke, and how I still had no idea what kind of life I wanted. Somewhere in all that, we stopped talking like neighbors who had run into each other by accident and started talking like people waiting for the next message. The first time we met on purpose after that, we chose the terminal again. Part of it was practical. Neither of us had much privacy. Part of it was probably because the terminal had already become the place where something hidden first found air. It was late afternoon, cool weather, buses breathing diesel, people moving around us with grocery bags and backpacks, the kind of public place where nobody really cares unless you give them a reason to. She arrived in jeans and a light sweater, hair down, no real effort to dress up, which somehow made it worse for me. Better and worse. I had rehearsed things to say and forgot them the second I saw her. We stood there smiling too much, both suddenly awkward. She teased me about the voice message and asked if I had really meant all of it. I told her yes, every word. She looked at me in a way I had never seen before, not playful, not neighborly, searching, like she was comparing the boy she remembered with the man standing in front of her and trying to decide if that difference was real. She said she still couldn't quite believe it. I told her I didn't care if she believed the timeline. I only cared that she believed the feeling. That made her smile. But there was something nervous in it. She said she couldn't stay long because the boys were home and her mother was out. I felt panic at the idea of the moment ending with nothing changed. That had been my pattern with her for too many years. Almost. Maybe. Not yet. Her bus was due any second. I could hear it before I saw it. That was when I made the choice that led to everything else. I stepped closer and kissed her. Not gently at first. Not because I wanted to be rough. Because when you have wanted something for years, your body can move before your pride does. It was a reckless kiss, too fast, too hungry, full of all the time I had already spent imagining it. The kind of kiss that either gets you pushed away forever or opens a door you can't later pretend you didn't mean to walk through. She did not push me away. There was one shocked second, and then she kissed me back. I still don't have language that fully covers what that did to me. Relief, triumph, desire, disbelief, all of it at once. For years, Celia had lived in my mind as a dream too forbidden to become real. Then suddenly I was standing there in public with my hand at her waist and her mouth on mine, and the whole fantasy had crossed into real life. When we pulled apart, she looked shaken. So was I. The bus was there now. People were boarding. Her younger son was already looking back at us with the bored impatience children have when adults are being strange. She whispered, "Ryan," and gave a breathy half laugh like she couldn't decide whether what had just happened was beautiful or a mistake. "Maybe both," I said. She stared at me another second, touched my arm, and got on the bus. I went home feeling 10 feet tall. For the next few days, every part of me felt lit up. Food tasted better. Music sounded better. Work got easier. I had not won anything concrete, not yet, but that kiss had moved me from fantasy into possibility, and possibility is a dangerous drug. We kept messaging, only now there was current under everything. The line had been crossed. Neither of us could pretend otherwise. We talked about the kiss once directly, then indirectly for days through jokes, pauses, and little references that said more than the words around them. A week later, I asked if she wanted to see me somewhere more private. She did not answer right away. When she did, she said yes. Derek helped without knowing exactly what he was helping with. I told him I needed the apartment to myself one evening and offered to cover his dinner if he disappeared for a few hours. He grinned, like he knew enough not to ask questions, and left before sunset. I cleaned more than I had ever cleaned in my life. The apartment still looked cheap, because it was cheap, but at least it looked deliberate. I changed the sheets, took out the trash, hid the laundry, checked my phone every 2 minutes, thought about canceling because suddenly the whole thing felt impossible, then thought about hating myself if I did. When she finally knocked, my hands actually shook. I opened the door, and there she was. Suddenly, out of every fantasy setting I had ever placed her in, and standing in the dim hallway outside my apartment with a nervous look on her face and a bag on her shoulder. She had told her mother she was running an errand. She only had a little time. Everything about that should have slowed me down. The secrecy, the children, the fact that she had once been my married neighbor while I was still a kid. The fact that if my mother had walked in and seen Celia in my apartment, half the street would have exploded by morning. Instead, the danger only sharpened everything. We didn't jump straight into bed. We stood there talking first, both pretending to be more composed than we were. She looked around the apartment and laughed softly at how hard I had tried to make it look decent. I offered her something to drink. She said no. I asked if she was okay. She said she was just nervous, so was I. Then there was that pause, the real kind, the kind where both people know the conversation has reached the edge of its actual purpose. I touched her face, gently this time. She didn't move away. What happened after that was the most overwhelming experience of my life up to that point. And I don't mean that in some childish bragging way. I mean I had wanted this woman for so long, through so many versions of myself, that being with her felt unreal, even while it was happening. Desire can make a moment feel bigger than time. That night did. Afterward, I lay there half stunned, and she looked at me with an expression I couldn't completely read. Tenderness, maybe. Surprise, too. Maybe she hadn't expected it to feel the way it felt for her either. She came back a few days later, then again after that. Soon we were finding every excuse we could to see each other. Not every meeting led to sex, though a lot of them did. Sometimes we just sat close and talked like we were making up for years that had never been ours. She told me pieces of what her marriage had been like, never in a cheap, bitter way, but enough for me to understand it had been colder and sadder than I had guessed from next door. I didn't press for details she didn't offer, partly because I respected that line, partly because I was selfish and didn't want anything spoiling the happiness I felt whenever she chose me, because that was what it felt like. Chosen. For a while, it was enough. More than enough. It felt impossible and then suddenly normal, which should have scared me more than it did. Human beings can normalize almost anything when pleasure is involved. We got used to careful timing, borrowed hours, little lies about where we were going. I got used to checking my phone for her name first thing in the morning. She got used to calling me when she could speak freely. I got used to the sound of her voice getting softer when it was just me. Somewhere in there I stopped thinking of it as a secret fling. To me it became a real relationship. I don't know the exact day that happened. Maybe it was the night she fell asleep with her head on my chest and I stayed awake staring at the ceiling, feeling strangely peaceful. Maybe it was when she started asking about my day before talking about hers. Maybe it was when she got annoyed if I took too long to answer and tried to hide it. Maybe it was when I realized I had stopped looking at other women completely. Whatever it was, it happened fast. And just as fast, the shadows around it got clearer. Celia did not want anyone to know. Not my parents. Definitely not my mother. Not her family. And above all, not her ex-husband. The first time she said that last part, her tone changed just enough to make me pay attention. Not dramatic. Not panicked. Just firm. She told me some men cannot stand the idea of a woman moving on, even if they were the ones who let the marriage die first. She said he was not somebody she wanted stirred up, especially not while the boys were still adjusting. I told her I understood. And I did, at least on the surface. The secrecy made sense. The age difference made sense too, even though I hated hearing her talk about it like it was some ugly obstacle hanging over us. To me, it didn't matter. I was 20. She was older. So what? We were both free. Nobody was cheating. Nobody was sneaking around behind a spouse's back. Why should love feel like something that had to be hidden under a coat? But every time I pushed a little toward openness, she pulled back. Not yet, she would say. Let me think. The boys first. My mother can't hear it from somebody else. You don't know how people talk. All of that was reasonable. That was the problem. Reasonable things are harder to argue with, even when they leave you lonely. So I agreed to wait. I would have agreed to almost anything then. I was too deep in the feeling of finally having what I had wanted for years. If she had told me we needed to stay hidden forever, I might have said yes just to keep from losing her. Still, small details started snagging in me, the way she always checked the street before getting out of a car. The way she sometimes froze if her phone buzzed while we were together. The way she once cancelled at the last minute and didn't message again until the next morning, saying only that something had come up with the boys. None of that was enough to make me doubt her. But it was enough to remind me that secret happiness is never just happiness. It comes with a ceiling, a locked door, a clock ticking somewhere you can't see. One Friday night, after she left my apartment later than usual, I stood at the window and watched her walk quickly toward the corner without looking back. It had rained earlier. The streetlights were shining off the wet pavement. She kept one arm folded across herself like she was cold, even though it wasn't that cold. I remember thinking that I loved her. Not wanted, not dreamed about. Loved. That thought should have made me feel good. Instead, it scared me a little, because love starts making plans before reality agrees to hold them. 3 days later, I went to my mother's house for Sunday dinner, and before I had even sat down, she asked me a question that made my whole body go still. When was the last time you saw Celia? I almost dropped my fork. It was such a simple question, but the way my mother asked it made it dangerous. She was standing at the stove with a dish towel over one shoulder, not even looking at me at first, just stirring gravy like she hadn't tossed a lit match into the middle of my chest. I tried to sound normal and asked why. She turned then, Not fully suspicious yet, but close enough that I felt heat crawl up my neck. She said Celia had called the house 2 days earlier, asking if I had stopped by. She said it casually, but there was something underneath it. Not accusation, interest. The kind mothers develop when a detail does not fit where it should. I shrugged and said I'd run into Celia once in a while around the neighborhood, that was all. My mother kept looking at me half a second too long. Then she nodded and went back to the stove. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. All through dinner I felt watched. My father barely noticed anything because he rarely noticed anything that wasn't directly in front of him, but my mother did. She noticed when I checked my phone. She noticed when I seemed distracted. She noticed when I answered too quickly or not quickly enough. Mothers keep little files in their heads. Mine was updating mine in real time. That night, after I got back to the apartment, I called Celia and asked why she had phoned my parents' house. There was a pause. Then she said she had been trying to reach me because I had not answered for hours, and she knew I sometimes visited on Sundays. She said it lightly, but I could hear the tension in her. I asked why it was so urgent. She told me her ex-husband had shown up at her mother's place without warning. Just hearing that tightened something in me. She said he had come to drop off money for the kids, but stayed longer than necessary, asked questions, looked around too much, acted like the house and the people inside it were still somehow part of his territory. According to her, he did not accuse her of anything directly, but he was fishing. He wanted to know where she went, who she talked to, what her plans were. She told me she got a bad feeling from the whole visit and just wanted to hear my voice after. I asked if he knew about me. She said no, definitely not. Then she added, "Not yet," in a tone I did not like at all. That little phrase sat with me all night. Not because it meant he knew, because it meant she believed he could. Over the next couple of weeks, I started seeing more clearly how fear shaped her. Not in some dramatic movie way, in quiet ways. She double-checked locks. She avoided certain stores on certain days because she knew he sometimes went there. She was careful about who saw her with me. If we met in public, she preferred places where people were moving through instead of sitting around. If I suggested I pick her up somewhere, she almost always said no. I wanted to be understanding. I was understanding, mostly. But sometimes it felt like our relationship only existed in borrowed spaces. My apartment, a parked car on a side street, quick meetings with one eye on the time, stolen kisses before she hurried away. I told myself love could survive that for a while. Still, a while has edges. A few days later, she came over in the afternoon while Derek was at work. She looked tired the second she walked in. Not physically tired, pressed down. I asked what was wrong, and she said her older boy had started asking whether his father was ever coming back home for good. She said she hated those questions because children ask them like they are asking where a missing shoe went, like there must be a simple answer somewhere if only the adults would stop hiding it. Then she sat on my couch, rubbed at her forehead, and said something that stayed with me. She said, "Sometimes I feel like my life is split into pieces, and I have to keep carrying them all without letting them touch." I knew what she meant. Her children in one piece, her family in another, her ex-husband in another, me in another, her fear in another, her desire in another. Everything separated, balanced, managed. I sat beside her and told her she did not have to do that forever. She looked at me and smiled sadly, like I had said something sweet and naive. That bothered me more than I expected, because I was not a fantasy. I was not a passing distraction. Maybe I was younger, maybe my life was simpler, but what I felt for her was real enough that every time she tucked me back into the hidden part of her life, it stung. I did not pick a fight that day. I kissed her, I held her, I let the mood soften. But the feeling stayed. It got worse the first time she cancelled on me, and I found out later why. We were supposed to meet at my apartment on a Thursday evening. Derek had gone out. I had bought food, cleaned up, even changed shirts twice like an idiot because I wanted to look right for her. Then, 20 minutes before she was supposed to arrive, she texted and said she couldn't come. No explanation, just sorry and not tonight. I called. She didn't answer. About an hour later, I got another message saying her ex had stopped by unexpectedly because one of the boys needed medicine and he wanted to take care of it himself. She said things got tense, and she could not get away. That should have been enough. Instead, I sat there in my apartment staring at my phone and feeling something mean and childish rise in me. Not because she had done anything wrong, because I suddenly hated him without even meeting him. Hated the way he could still reach into her time. Hated the way he could change our plans just by showing up. Hated that I had no place to stand in that situation except the hidden one. When she called later that night, I was colder than I meant to be. She noticed immediately. She asked if I was mad. I said no. She said I sounded mad. I told her I was just tired of feeling like our whole relationship could be erased anytime somebody else knocked on her mother's door. Silence. Then she asked what I wanted her to do. The real answer was impossible. I wanted her to choose me openly and immediately and without fear. I wanted her to stop acting like our relationship was something fragile and shameful that had to be wrapped in cloth and put away before company arrived. I wanted the world arranged to fit what I felt. Instead, I said I just wanted this to feel real. Her voice changed after that. Softer, but more guarded. She said it was real. She said that was exactly why she was being careful. She said, I did not fully understand how ugly separations can get when pride, children, and gossip all mix together. She was right. I didn't. At the time, though, being right did not make her easier to live with. For a couple of days, things felt strained between us. We still talked, but there was less warmth in it, more caution. I hated that, so I did what I always seemed to do with her. I pushed toward closeness again. I showed up near her mother's place after work and texted that I was outside. She called me immediately asking what I was doing there. Not angrily exactly, but alarmed. I said I just wanted to see her. She came out a minute later wearing a sweatshirt and that look people get when they are worried somebody might be watching from behind a curtain. We walked half a block before she turned on me and said I couldn't just appear there. I asked why not. I was careful. Nobody had seen me. She said I didn't know that. Then she said something sharper than usual. She said just because I was young did not mean every problem in the world could be solved by charging straight at it. That hit me hard. Not because she was completely wrong, because it was the first time she had used my age like a wall between us, instead of a fact around us. I told her not to talk to me like I was a kid. She said then stop acting like one. We stood there on the sidewalk in the fading light, both angrier than the actual moment deserved. Cars passed. Somebody's dog barked from a fenced yard. I felt stupid and exposed and too proud to back down. Then she exhaled, rubbed at her face, and said she was sorry. She said she was just scared all the time lately. Scared of her ex creating problems, scared of people talking, scared of hurting her children, scared of letting something good into her life and watching it turn into something ugly because of timing or pressure. The anger drained out of me when she said that, not all at once, but enough. I took her hand. She let me. We walked another block in silence. Then she stopped and leaned into me, forehead against my shoulder, and for a minute she just stood there breathing. I didn't have a big speech ready, so I told the truth. I said I knew I was impatient. I said I knew her life was heavier than mine, but I wasn't playing with her. I wasn't chasing a fantasy anymore. I loved her, and I was trying to figure out how to carry that without feeling shut out. She looked up at me then, eyes wet but not crying, and said she knew. Then she kissed me right there by the curb as headlights slid past at the end of the block. That should have settled things. Instead, it pushed us into the next problem. Because hidden relationships do not stay hidden forever, not when people live in real neighborhoods with real eyes and mouths. The first leak came through my mother. I was back at my parents' house one evening when she mentioned, too casually, that she had seen Celia downtown the week before. She said Celia looked good, healthier, lighter somehow. Then she gave me a sideways glance and asked whether I had run into her lately. I said once or twice. My mother nodded in that way that meant she believed less than half of what I had just said. A few days later, she called me at work and asked if I could come by that night because she wanted to talk. That phrase alone was enough to make my stomach tighten. Mothers and girlfriends use it differently, but neither version is good. When I got there, she didn't waste time. She asked me straight out whether there was something going on between me and Celia. For a second, I considered lying. Then I saw her face and knew it would be useless. Somebody had seen something, or she had put enough pieces together that she no longer needed proof. So I asked what made her say that. She crossed her arms and told me not to answer a question with a question. Then she said Celia had started looking flustered every time my name came up. She said my own face changed whenever hers did. She said she was my mother, not an idiot. There are moments when your life can still go two ways, and you know it before you answer. I told her yes. Her eyes widened, not because she hadn't suspected it, but because suspicion becoming fact is always louder than suspicion alone. She sat down hard at the table and just stared at me for a second. Then came the questions. Since when? How serious? Does her family know? Do the boys know? And finally, the one with the most judgment packed inside it. Ryan, what are you doing? I answered as honestly as I could. I told her we had started seeing each other after the separation, that nobody had cheated, that it was serious to me, that we were being discreet because Celia was worried about her ex and about the boys and about how people talk. My mother listened, but I could see all her concerns sorting themselves into order. The age difference bothered her. The children bothered her. The neighborhood gossip bothered her. The possibility that I was getting pulled into something too complicated bothered her most of all. She asked if I really thought I was ready for a woman with 2 kids and an angry ex-husband still circling around. I said maybe nobody is ready for those things until they are in them. She didn't like that answer. We argued for almost an hour. Not screaming, worse than screaming. Tight, disappointed voices. She told me I'd barely started my life. Told me there was a difference between love and getting lost inside a story that flatters you. Told me older women can make younger men feel chosen in ways that cloud judgment. That last part made me furious. I told her Celia was not manipulating me. I told her I had wanted Celia long before Celia ever wanted me back. I told her none of this was a trick or a phase or some little conquest to make me feel like a man. My mother looked genuinely shaken when I said I had wanted her that long. Like she was suddenly realizing this story had roots she never saw. In the end, she did what people do when they cannot stop something and do not want to bless it. She warned me, said to be careful, said she did not trust the situation even if she trusted me. I left her house angry and more alone than I had felt in weeks. That night, I told Celia what had happened. She went quiet in exactly the way I feared she would. Then she asked very softly, what did she say about me? That question told me everything. She was not just afraid of scandal. She was afraid of being judged as the older woman who got involved with the neighbor's son, afraid of being reduced to that in one ugly sentence. So I told her the truth without cruelty. I said my mother was worried, about me, about the complications, about all of it. I also told her I had defended her. Celia let out a breath I could hear through the phone. Then she said, this is exactly why I wanted more time. I snapped back that more time would not change what people thought if they were determined to think the worst. That turned into our biggest fight yet. She said I was making everything about public approval. I said she was using fear to keep our relationship half alive. She said I had no idea what it meant to protect children from adult mess. I said I was tired of feeling like a secret she could enjoy privately and deny publicly. The second those words came out, I knew they were cruel. She went silent. Then she said, is that really what you think I'm doing? I wanted to take it back. Pride kept me from doing it fast enough. She hung up. The next 3 days were miserable. No calls. A few short messages about nothing practical. No warmth. No apology from her. None from me either at first, because sometimes ego dresses itself up as principle. On the 3rd night, Derek found me sitting in the dark in the living room and asked if I was dying or just dramatic. I told him to shut up. He sat down anyway. I had never really told him the full story before. He knew I was seeing someone complicated. He knew enough to leave the apartment when I needed him to. But that night I told him everything. The neighbor, the years, the marriage, the kids, the secrecy, the fight. When I finished, he whistled low and said, "Man, you are in deep." I said I knew. Then he said something unexpectedly smart for a guy who once tried to cook frozen pizza without taking the cardboard off. He said if I had wanted something for that long, I better make sure I was fighting the actual problem, and not just the fact that real life had failed to match the fantasy perfectly. That irritated me because it was good advice. So the next morning I called Celia before work. She didn't answer. I sent a message asking if I could see her that evening, somewhere public if she preferred. No pressure, just talk. She agreed. We met at a park near the community center just before sunset. Children were still playing on the swings. A man was walking laps with headphones on. It was the kind of place where nobody pays attention to your quiet disaster unless it becomes loud. She looked tired again, but more guarded this time. I apologized first. Not a half apology, not a strategic one, a full one. I told her I had been unfair. I told her I knew she was not ashamed of me. I told her I had said the most hurtful version of what I was feeling because I wanted her to hurt too. She listened without interrupting. Then she said she was sorry for speaking to me like my age made my feelings less real. She said she was terrified all the time of one wrong step blowing up in her face, and sometimes fear made her talk, like she was managing a situation instead of loving a person. That word mattered. Loving. Neither of us had said it out loud to each other yet. I looked at her and asked if that was what this was to her. She started to answer, stopped, then smiled a little like she hated how vulnerable the moment was, and said yes. That was exactly what it was. That was the whole problem. I laughed then, half from relief. We sat down on a bench near the basketball court, and for the first time we talked less about hiding and more about what a path forward might actually look like. Not some fantasy version where everything became easy. A real one. Slow, difficult, but real. She said the boys needed stability first. She said her older son was old enough to notice changes and ask hard questions. She said she did not want some half-explained relationship dropped into their laps before she understood how serious and durable it was. I told her I understood. Then I asked the harder question. How serious and durable did she think it was? She took longer answering that one. Finally, she said she had tried not to think that far because thinking that far made everything riskier. But if she was honest, she thought about me all the time. She planned around me. She missed me if one day went wrong. She imagined things she knew she probably should not be imagining yet. I asked what things. She gave me a look and said, "Don't push it." I pushed anyway. Gently. She admitted she had pictured what it would be like not to hide, to have dinner with me somewhere in the open, to stop inventing excuses, to see whether I could fit into the complicated shape of her actual life instead of just the stolen corners of it. That was enough for me. More than enough. We left the park that evening with something we had not had before, a plan, not a polished one, but a real one. Step one was that we would stop acting like the relationship existed only in private rooms. We still would not announce it to the world, but we would let it breathe a little. Step two was that she would tell her mother the truth. Step three, eventually, would be the boys. Her ex would come later if he had to, but not as an act of fear, as an act of fact. That plan held for exactly 9 days before reality forced step four on us. I met her at a grocery store on a Tuesday evening. Nothing romantic about it. She had the boys with her and said if I wanted to see her, I could stop by the store and help carry bags after. We told ourselves that would be innocent enough. Maybe it was until it wasn't. I was standing beside the cart, talking to her older son about a cereal he wanted, when a voice behind us said, "Who's this?" I turned and saw a man about my height, maybe a little thicker through the shoulders, holding a pack of batteries and staring straight at me. Celia went pale. That was all I needed to know about who he was. Her ex. He didn't shout. That would have been simpler. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that warns you something mean is about to happen in a polite tone. He asked again who I was. Celia answered too quickly that I was an old neighbor. He looked from her to me to the boys and back again like he was measuring a lie for size. Then he said, "Funny. You never mentioned your old neighbor." The boys had gone quiet. Her older one looked between the adults like he could feel something bad moving in the air even if he didn't understand the shape of it. I should have kept my mouth shut. Maybe. But I could not stand there being looked over like a stain on his floor. So I put out my hand and told him my name. He stared at my hand for a second before shaking it. His grip was too hard, deliberately. Then he asked how long we had known each other. Celia cut in and said, "This wasn't the place." He ignored her, kept looking at me. I told him we had been neighbors for years. He smirked and said, "Yeah, that part sounds about right. There are humiliations that happen publicly, but feel private because only the people involved understand the meaning under the words. That was one of them. Nothing explicit had been said, but his tone made it feel dirty anyway. Territorial. Accusing. Celia straightened then and told him the boys were there, so whatever point he was trying to make could wait. Something in her voice changed. Not louder, firmer. The kind of firmness that comes from being pushed too often. He looked at her, really looked, and I think he understood in that second that he was not imagining things. He said, "We'll talk later." Then he walked away. The rest of that grocery trip felt like being inside a room after a glass breaks. Everything looks the same, but people move more carefully. The boys sensed it. Her younger one got clingy. Her older one stopped asking for anything. Out in the parking lot, I offered to help carry groceries to her mother's house anyway. She said no too quickly. Then she softened and said, "Not tonight." I asked if she was okay. She looked like she wanted to say yes and didn't have the energy for lying. So she said, "Not really." That night her ex called repeatedly. She didn't answer the first few times. Then she finally did. And from what she told me later, he went straight for accusation. Asked if she was sleeping with some kid from the old neighborhood. Asked if that was what she had downgraded to. Asked if she had any idea how ridiculous that looked. That word got under my skin when she repeated it. Ridiculous. Not wrong, not immoral. Ridiculous. Like love had to pass some public test to count. According to Celia, he also said he didn't want strange men around his sons. That line would have sounded more noble if he hadn't spent half the separation treating their emotional world like an appointment book he could dip in and out of. For the first time, she didn't try to soothe him. She told him the marriage was over and had been over for a long time. She told him he didn't get to decide what her life looked like anymore. She also told him, and this mattered most to me later, that if he had questions about the boys, they could discuss the boys. But he would not be policing her private life. He apparently hung up on her. I didn't sleep much that night either. The next week was brutal, not because he did anything dramatic at first, because he did what controlling people do best. He applied pressure around the edges, cold messages about pickup times, sharp little comments in front of the boys, sudden interest in details he had never cared about before. He was trying to make her feel watched and judged without giving her an obvious scene to point to. Then he crossed a line. On Saturday morning, while I was at work, my mother called and asked me to come over immediately. The tone in her voice made my stomach drop. When I got there, she was standing in the living room with her arms folded and a printed photo on the coffee table between us. Grainy, cropped, taken from a distance. It was me and Celia outside my apartment building 3 nights earlier. She was getting into my car after I had borrowed one from Derek's cousin. My hand was at her back, close enough to say exactly what it needed to say. I looked up at my mother. She said the photo had been left in our mailbox with no note. For 1 second, I just stood there hearing my own pulse. Then anger hit, hot and clean. Because there was only one person petty enough and invested enough to do that. Her ex. My mother asked who would do something like that. I told her. She sat down slowly, suddenly looking less judgmental and more worried. She asked whether he was dangerous. I said I didn't know, not exactly, but this wasn't normal. She asked if Celia knew. I said not yet. I drove straight to her mother's house, not caring that I had promised not to show up unannounced again. She came outside the second she saw my face and knew something was wrong. When I showed her the photo, she went white. Not shocked by the content, shocked by what it meant. Somebody had been watching. Somebody had followed. Somebody wanted to intimidate. She pressed her fingers to her mouth and just stood there for a second. Then she whispered, "He did this." I said yes. That was the moment something in both of us changed. Fear had been shaping us from the outside for months. Now it had put a physical object in our hands. A threat without words, an exposure attempt, proof that secrecy no longer protected us. Celia straightened, took the photo again, and looked at it for a long second. Then she said, "I'm done." Not dramatic, not loud, done. That same afternoon, she told her mother everything. I expected a disaster. It wasn't. Her mother was startled, obviously. Concerned too. The age difference, the children, the timing, all of it. But once the photo entered the conversation, the focus shifted. Whatever she thought of our relationship, she did not like the idea of her daughter being monitored and humiliated by an ex who refused to stay in his lane. 2 days later, Celia told the boys a softened version of the truth. Not every detail. Just that Mom had someone she cared about, someone from the old neighborhood, and eventually they would meet properly. Her younger son mostly looked confused. Her older one asked if that was why the man at the grocery store had been mad. Children always notice more than adults want to believe. Then came the part I had been half dreading and half needing. Meeting them. I came over on a Sunday afternoon with pizza and too much anxiety. I had spent years imagining being close to Celia, and almost none of that imagination had included the reality of trying to make a good impression on the sons of the woman I loved. But the moment mattered. Not as a test I could ace in one day, as a beginning. The younger boy warmed up first because children that age can be bribed by food and attention. The older one studied me more carefully, not hostile. Protective in a way kids become when the adults around them have disappointed them too many times. I respected that. I didn't try to force anything. We ate, we talked. I helped with a video game I barely understood. At one point, the younger boy laughed hard enough at something stupid. I said that Celia looked across the room at me and smiled with a kind of relief that nearly broke me. Because for the first time, I was not hidden. I was in the room. That should have been the victory. It wasn't the last fight. Her ex showed up 2 evenings later while I was there. He didn't know I was inside until the older boy opened the door too fast, and the whole thing collapsed at once. Voices rose in the front hallway. Celia moved before I did. By the time I reached them, she was already between him and the living room, telling him the boys were present and he needed to lower his voice. He saw me over her shoulder and laughed without humor. "So it's true," he said. I expected rage. What I did not expect was contempt so open it almost felt rehearsed. He looked at me like I was a joke he had waited to confirm. Then he started in on the age difference. Called me a boy, called me a rebound, said she was embarrassing herself, said she would get tired of pretending this was serious the second real life hit. I wanted to hit him. I truly did. That was my limit moral line right there. My body was ready for it. My pride begged for it. He was in her mother's house talking to her like that with the boys listening from the hallway, but I didn't. I stayed where I was and told him to stop talking about her like she belonged to him. That made him turn on me, which was better, easier. He took a step closer and asked what exactly I planned to do with a woman who had children, bills, history, and a whole life beyond whatever fantasy I was playing at. He asked if I thought desire was the same thing as being ready. Celia answered before I could. She told him the only person performing in that room was him. She told him the marriage had been dead long before the separation papers made it official. She told him she had spent too long arranging herself around his ego, and she was finished doing it. Most of all, she told him that whatever he thought of me was irrelevant, because she chose me. That sentence hit the room like a thrown stone. The boys heard it. Her mother heard it from the kitchen. I heard it and felt something inside me lock into place. He stared at her for a second, stunned more by her tone than the words. Then he said a few ugly things about how long this had probably really been going on, trying to imply overlap, betrayal, anything that would dirty it. She shut that down immediately, told him he would not rewrite timelines to flatter his pride. Finally, her mother stepped in too and told him to leave, and he did. Not gracefully, but he did. After the door closed, nobody moved for a second. Then the younger boy started crying, more from tension than understanding, and the whole room exhaled into aftermath. That night was hard. The boys were upset. Celia was shaking after the adrenaline wore off. Her mother made tea nobody drank. I stayed until things calmed, then offered to leave so the family could settle. Celia walked me to the porch. We stood there in the dark with the porch light buzzing overhead, both wrung out. I asked if she was sure. About all of it. She said yes. Then she took my face in both hands and kissed me with none of the hiding that had marked us from the start. No watching for curtains, no glancing at the street, no apology in it. That was the real beginning, not the terminal kiss, not the apartment, that porch. Because after that, the relationship stopped being a secret trying to survive and became a fact trying to build a life. It still wasn't easy. My mother needed time. Some of Celia's relatives had opinions I never asked for. The boys adjusted in uneven steps. Her ex sulked, then postured, then finally settled into a colder kind of distance once it became clear intimidation was not giving him back control. Life did not turn cinematic and perfect. Money was still tight. Timing was still messy. We still argued sometimes because love does not erase age, exhaustion, parenthood, insecurity, or old habits. But the shape of things changed. I started spending more time at her mother's house, then more time helping with practical things, school pickups when needed, fixing a leaking sink, taking the boys for burgers, sitting at the table doing nothing dramatic at all while real life happened around me. Strange how quickly ordinary intimacy can feel deeper than stolen passion. My mother, to her credit, came around slowly instead of pretending she had never doubted us. The first real shift happened when she saw me with the boys one Saturday afternoon and later admitted in her stiff way that I looked less lost than she expected. That was almost a blessing coming from her. Months later, when Celia and I finally stopped talking about some vague future and started talking about an actual place of our own, I remembered all the old versions of me who had loved her in silence. The 16-year-old staring at her across a birthday party. The 18-year-old shaking over a cup of coffee because she said he was becoming a man. The 20-year-old staring at an empty house and thinking he had missed his chance forever. That boy would never have believed how real life would actually look. Not glamorous, not simple, not fantasy, better. Because fantasy never asks you to stay when things get complicated. Real love does. About a year after that first kiss at the terminal, we moved into a small rental house on the other side of town. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms and a converted den, old cabinets, a tiny backyard, traffic noise if you listened for it. The boys argued over where to put things. Celia complained about the stove. I carried boxes until my back hurt and loved every second of it. That first night, after the boys were asleep and the house was finally quiet, we stood in the kitchen surrounded by half-unpacked dishes and looked at each other. No hiding, no borrowed time, no bus pulling away. Just us. Celia laughed softly and said if somebody had told her 2 years earlier that this would be her life, she would have called them insane. I told her I probably would have believed it before she did. She asked why. I said because I had been dreaming about her long enough to know impossible things, sometimes spend years pretending they're impossible before they finally happen. She shook her head at that and kissed me. I know how this sounds. Too neat, maybe. Too lucky after so much strain. But luck was only part of it. The bigger part was that once everything ugly got dragged into the light, it stopped controlling us. The fear, the secrecy, the gossip, the ex-husband's shadow, all of it lost power when it had to stand in public and show its face. That does not mean everybody approved. It means approval stopped mattering more than truth. And the truth was simple by then. I loved her, she loved me. We chose the hard version instead of the hidden one. Sometimes I still think about that first party, the paper plate in my hand, the cheap frosting smell in the air, Celia walking toward me with cake and saying she had brought something for the cutest couple there. Maybe it meant nothing then. Maybe it was just a harmless joke from a beautiful woman to 2 awkward teenagers, or maybe life plants tiny things long before you understand what they are. Either way, she became the dream I could not shake. Then the woman I could not forget, then the secret I thought I would lose, and finally the person I woke up beside in a house full of noise and shoes by the door, and all the ordinary proof that something once impossible had become my daily life. For a long time I thought the best part of dreams was how bright they felt while they stayed out of reach. I was wrong. The best part is when they stop being dreams and start costing you something real, because that is how you know they finally became yours. What would you do in this situation? Be honest, or did this remind you of someone? Tell me in the comments. And if this made you think about your own relationship, I left something in the description that can help you build something stronger. Subscribe if you want more stories like this every day, and share this with someone who needs to hear this story.